The stars burned with death on that terrible day. Admiral Javron stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the end of everything he had ever known. His crystalline body flickered with exhaustion as explosion after explosion lit up the darkness of space. Around him, 40,000 warships from 12 different alien civilizations fought against an enemy that could not be stopped. The Haramine Collective had terrorized the galaxy for 300 years. They were not like other enemies. They were a swarm of biomechanical ships that thought as one mind. They learned from every battle. They adapted to every weapon. They consumed everything in their path and used the wreckage to build more of themselves. For 3 centuries, world after world had fallen to them. Species after species had been wiped from existence. Now the last free civilizations of the galaxy had gathered their entire military might for one final stand at the edge of the Valkyrie Nebula. Javron had believed they could win. How foolish that hope seemed now. "Admiral, the left flank is collapsing," shouted one of his officers. "Send the reserve carriers to support them," Javron commanded. But even as he gave the order, he knew it would not matter. The Haramine was adapting too fast. In the first 2 hours of battle, their plasma weapons had cut through enemy ships with ease. Then the swarm learned. Now those same weapons barely scratched the Haramine vessels. By the 5th hour, the quantum torpedoes that had destroyed thousands of enemy drones became useless. The swarm had figured out how to neutralize them. Every tactic the Alliance tried, the Haramine countered within minutes. On a small section of the battle line, 17 human frigates and 1 old battlecruiser fought alongside their alien allies. The humans were new to the galaxy. They had only discovered faster than light travel a century ago. Their ships were primitive compared to the ancient vessels of other species. But they had joined the fight anyway. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Eyes Defiance, her hands gripping the command console as her ship shook from nearby explosions. She was a tall woman with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that had seen too much death already. "Commander, the Defiance has lost forward shields." Her first officer reported. "Reroute power from non-essential systems," Vasquez ordered, "and keep firing. Every second we stay in this fight is a second for someone else to survive." Around her, human crew members worked with desperate speed. They knew they were outmatched. Their little fleet was nothing compared to the great armadas of the elder races. But not one of them thought of running. The battle raged on for 11 terrible hours. Javron watched his tactical display with growing horror. Blue dots representing Alliance ships winked out of existence by the hundreds, by the thousands. The Haramine swarm, shown as a red cloud, seemed to grow larger with every passing minute. "They are using our own ships against us," the center officer cried. "The wreckage of our vessels is being absorbed into their swarm." This was the true nightmare of fighting. The Haramine. Every ship you lost became material for new enemies. Every defeat made them stronger. By the 9th hour, Javron gave the order he had prayed he would never have to give. "All ships, retreat." Emergency jump to designated coordinates. The retreat was chaos. Ships that could still move fled toward the jump points. Those too damaged to escape fought on until they were destroyed. The swarm did not pursue immediately. Why would they? They had won. They stopped to feast on the remains of the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever assembled. When the surviving ships finally gathered at the emergency rendezvous, Javron counted the losses. 36,000 warships destroyed, millions of crew members dead. Only 4,000 vessels remained, and most of those were badly damaged. The human fleet had lost 12 of its 17 frigates. The Defiance had survived, but barely. Smoke filled her corridors. Emergency crews worked to seal dozens of hull breaches. Commander Vasquez had burns on her arms from an exploding console, but she refused medical treatment. "What do we do now?" her first officer asked. Quietly, Vasquez stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Haramind was finishing its meal. Soon it would turn toward the core worlds, where 1,000,000,000,000 innocent people lived. And there was nothing left to stop them. "I do not know," she admitted. "But I know we cannot give up. There has to be a way." On the flagship, Admiral Javron received reports from across what remained of the fleet. Every message was worse than the last. The shipyards that could build new vessels were 2 years away from producing anything useful. The weapon factories had been destroyed. In earlier campaigns, the Alliance had spent everything on this one battle, and they had lost. He looked at the star chart, showing the path the Haramind would take. First, they would hit the Mantid colonies, then the synthesis worlds, then the Corallan hegemony, and eventually they would reach Earth and the young human civilization. 40,000 ships. ShHFY whispered to himself. We gave them everything and it was not enough. What hope is left? Across the fleet, similar conversations were happening. Every species, every commander, every soldier was asking the same question. They had united against the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. They had fought with courage and honor, and they had been utterly defeated. The Haramind would reach the first core world in 3 weeks. After that, the great dying would begin. Civilization after civilization would fall. In 100 years, perhaps less, there would be nothing left. The galaxy would belong to the swarm. On the Defiance, Commander Vasquez finally allowed a medic to treat her burns. But even as the doctor worked, her mind was racing. She kept thinking about something her grandfather had told her when she was young. When the enemy is too strong to fight head-on, he had said, you find another way. You hit them where they are weak. You use what they do. Not expect. What did the Haramind not expect? What had no one ever tried? A crazy idea began to form in her mind. It was desperate. It was probably suicide. But as she looked at the broken fleet around her, she knew that desperate times called for desperate measures. She just needed to convince the galaxy to listen to one small human. Sanctuary Station was the last hope of a dying galaxy. The massive space station drifted in the darkness between stars, hidden from the Haramind by ancient cloaking technology. It was the final meeting place of the Galactic Council, where representatives from every surviving species had gathered to decide the fate of their people. The council chamber was enormous. It had been built to hold delegates from 40 different civilizations. Now it felt like a funeral hall. The mood was heavy with grief and fear. Many seats were empty because those species no longer existed. Admiral Javron stood before the assembly, his crystalline form dim with exhaustion and sorrow. He had not slept since the battle. How could anyone sleep when the end of everything was coming? I will not waste time with false hope, he began. Our fleet is finished. We lost 36,000 ships. The Haramind grows stronger, even as we grow weaker. We have no reserves, no secret weapons, and no time to build new forces. Murmurs of despair rippled through the chamber. Some delegates wept. Others sat in stunned silence. Then what do you suggest? Asked High Counselor Mreth of the Vorn Republic. His gray skin had turned pale with fear. Surely there must be something we can do. We could negotiate, suggested Ambassador Thress of the Mantid Concordat. Her insect-like mandibles clicked nervously as she spoke. Perhaps the Haramind would accept tribute. We could offer resources, technology, even inhabited worlds as payment for our survival. The Haramind does not negotiate. The voice came from the synthesis representative, an ancient artificial intelligence that appeared as a hologram of shifting geometric patterns. The synthesis was older than most civilizations, a collective of machine minds that had watched the galaxy for millions of years. We have studied the HFY extensively, the AI continued. They do not want resources. They do not want slaves. They do not even want power. They consume because consuming is their nature. Speaking to them of peace is like asking a fire not to burn. They are entropy given form, the end of all things made flesh. Silence fell over the chamber. What could anyone say to that? Then, we must evacuate, declared Premier Goss of the Filari Union. We scatter our people to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Some of us might survive. We can hide in the empty spaces between stars. For how long? Javern asked bitterly. The HFY does not stop. They do not tire. In 100 years, 1,000 years, they will find every last one of us. Running only delays the end. More voices rose in argument. Some called for surrender. Others demanded one more battle, even if it meant certain death. A few suggested simply waiting for the end and accepting their fate with dignity. Commander Elena Vasquez sat in the small corner reserved for the human delegation. Compared to the ancient empires around her, humanity was barely an infant. Their voice carried little weight in these halls. Most of the alien delegates did not even look at the human representatives. But Vasquez was not listening to the arguments. She was studying her datapad, reviewing everything humanity knew about the HFY. She had spent the last 3 days reading every report, every study, every piece of intelligence ever gathered about the enemy. And she had found something interesting. The HFY was not just a random swarm. It had a central intelligence, a nexus that coordinated all the drones. This nexus was hidden deep within the swarm, protected by millions of defenders. No one had ever gotten close to it because no one had ever survived long enough to try. But what if someone could reach it? What if someone could destroy the brain of the beast? Vasquez stood up. No one noticed. The argument continued around her, voices rising in fear and anger. I have a proposal, she said. No one heard her. She was just a human, after all, a representative of a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. She raised her voice louder. I said I have a proposal. Still the chamber ignored her. Javern was arguing with Ambassador Thress about evacuation routes. Premier Goss was shouting about resource allocation. Vasquez slammed her hand on the console in front of her. The sharp sound echoed through the chamber. Suddenly, dozens of alien eyes turned toward the small human woman. Finally, she said. Now will you listen to me? Admiral Javern stared at her with surprise. Commander Vasquez, this council is discussing matters of galactic survival. What could humanity possibly contribute to this conversation? One ship, Vasquez replied. Give me one ship, a crew of volunteers, and full access to your intelligence on the HFY Nexus. Laughter erupted from several delegates. The manted ambassador clicked with what might have been amusement. Even Ziavrin seemed confused. One ship? The admiral repeated. Commander, we threw 40,000 ships at them. 40,000. And we were crushed. What do you imagine one ship could accomplish? Vasquez stepped forward, her eyes burning with determination. 40,000 ships fighting the way this galaxy has always fought wars. Formation tactics. Superior firepower. Honorable engagement. You threw strength against strength and lost. She activated her datapad and projected a hologram into the center of the chamber. It showed the HFY swarm, vast and terrifying, with a single pulsing point at its heart. You have been fighting their body, she continued. Millions of drones, each one replaceable. But no one has ever tried to kill their brain. The Nexus coordinates everything. Without it, the swarm becomes chaos. The synthesis spoke up. The Nexus is protected by approximately 3 million drones at any given time. The probability of a single ship reaching it is effectively zero. Vasquez smiled grimly. Probability is just math. And math has never met a stubborn human. What weapon could one ship possibly carry that would make a difference? Demanded Promagos. We have used every weapon known to science. The weapon I have in mind has never been used in space, Vasquez answered. It comes from Earth, from our own history of war and survival. And it cannot be adapted against, because it does not play by the rules. What weapon? Javrin asked, his curiosity now overcoming his doubt. Vasquez looked around the chamber at all the alien faces watching her. She took a deep breath. Us, she said. Humans. We are the weapon. We are unpredictable, irrational, and too stubborn to know when we are beaten. The Harrow mind learns from patterns, but humans do not follow patterns. We make things up as we go, and that makes us very, very dangerous. The council argued for 6 more hours. But in the end, what choice did they have? Everything else had failed. Perhaps human madness was worth trying. Commander Vasquez returned to the Defiance with authorization to attempt the impossible. Now she just had to convince her crew to die with her. The crew of the Defiance gathered in the main cargo bay. 847 men and women stood in neat rows, their faces tired but attentive. They had fought in the worst battle in galactic history. They had lost friends and watched their fleet be torn apart. Now their commander had called them together for an important announcement. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on a raised platform, looking out at her people. These were not just soldiers to her. She knew many of their names, their stories, their families back on Earth. What she was about to ask of them was unfair, but she would ask anyway because there was no other choice. I am not going to lie to you, she began. The war is lost. The combined fleets of 12 civilizations could not stop the Harrow mind. In 3 weeks, they will reach the core worlds. In a few years, they will reach Earth. Everyone we love, everything we have built, will be destroyed. She paused to let her words sink in. The crew listened in silence. They had already guessed most of this, but hearing it spoken aloud made it painfully real. The Galactic Council has given up, Vasquez continued. They talk about running, hiding, surrendering. But I have a different idea. A crazy idea. An idea that will probably get us all killed. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Humans had a strange habit of finding humor in darkness. I have asked for permission to take this ship deep into Harrow mind territory. Our target is the Nexus, the central brain that controls the entire swarm. If we can destroy it, the enemy will fall into chaos. The galaxy might have a chance to survive. Lieutenant Marcus Chun, the ship's tactical officer, raised his hand. He was a young man with sharp eyes and a quick mind. Commander, how do we get past millions of drones to reach the Nexus? We sneak past them, Vasquez answered. We go silent and cold. We use captured Harrow mind technology to disguise ourselves. We move slowly and carefully until we are close enough to strike. And then what? Asked Ensign Adeza Conquo, the chief engineer. She was a broad-shouldered woman who could fix anything with enough time and spare parts. What weapon do we have that can destroy something that big? Vasquez took a deep breath. This was the part that would be hardest to explain. The weapon is a biological virus, she said. Dr. Yusuf has been working on it since the battle. It is based on samples of Harrow mind tissue we recovered from destroyed drones. The virus is designed to spread through their neural network and tear them apart from the inside. Dr. Fatima Yusuf stepped forward. She was the ship's chief medical officer and resident scientist, a small woman with gray hair and brilliant eyes. The Harrow mind shares information through biological connections. She explained, if we can inject the virus directly into the Nexus, it will spread to every drone in the swarm. They will basically go insane attacking each other instead of us. The crew murmured among themselves. It sounded impossible. But then again, everything about this war had seemed impossible. "Here's the truth," Vasquez said, her voice growing softer. "This is a one-way mission. Even if everything goes perfectly, there is no way for us to get out. We will have to fly the Defiance directly into the Nexus to deliver the virus. The ship will be destroyed. We will all die." Silence fell over the cargo bay. 847 people faced the reality of what they were being asked to do. "I cannot order you to come with me," Vasquez continued. "This is beyond duty, beyond orders. I am asking for volunteers only. Anyone who wants to leave can transfer to the surviving fleet. There is no shame in choosing to live. You have families, loved ones, futures that deserve a chance." She waited. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Lieutenant Chun stepped forward. "My family is on Earth, Commander. If we do not do this, they die anyway. I volunteer." Ensign Okonkwo joined him. "I did not become an engineer to run away from a challenge. Count me in." Dr. Yusuf smiled sadly. "Someone needs to make sure the virus works. I volunteer." One by one, crew members stepped forward. Young and old, men and women, officers and enlisted. They came from every part of Earth, every background, every walk of life. They knew they were stepping toward death. Every single person volunteered. Vasquez felt tears forming in her eyes, but she held them back. There would be time for emotions later. Right now, there was work to do. "Then let us get started," she declared. "We have 2 weeks to prepare. Mr. Chun, I need you to study every piece of intelligence we have on Haramine movement patterns. Find us a path through the swarm." "Yes, Commander." Ms. Okonkwo will work with the synthesis engineers. "I want our engines modified for silent running. We need to be invisible. I will make this ship into a ghost, Commander. Dr. Yusuf, finish the virus. Make sure it is ready for delivery. We only get one chance at this. It will be ready." The crew dispersed to their duties. The Defiance buzzed with activity as humans worked side by side with alien engineers and scientists. The other species watched in amazement as these young newcomers to the stars threw themselves into an impossible task. Admiral Javrin visited the ship on the 3rd day. He found Commander Vasquez in the engine room, covered in grease and helping to install new components. "I must admit, I did not think you were serious," the crystalline alien said. "Most species, when facing certain death, try to preserve themselves. Why do your people fight so hard for a mission that cannot succeed?" Vasquez wiped her hands on a rag and looked up at him. "Who says it cannot succeed? Mathematics, logic, everything we know about warfare." "Then maybe you do not know everything," Vasquez replied. "Humans have a long history of doing impossible things. We call it being stubborn. Some call it being stupid. But it has gotten us this far." Javrin studied her for a long moment. "You truly believe you can win?" "I believe we can try," Vasquez answered. "And sometimes that is enough." The Admiral had no response to that. He simply nodded and left the ship, wondering if perhaps the galaxy had underestimated these strange young beings from Earth. 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and preparation. When the day finally came, the Defiance was ready. Commander Vasquez stood on the bridge as the ship powered up for the last time. Behind her, 846 brave souls waited at their posts. "Set course for the Haramine swarm," she ordered. "Course laid in, Commander." "Then let us go show the galaxy what humans can do." The Defiance jumped into hyperspace, carrying the last hope of 1 trillion lives into the darkness. Cold and darkness became the only friends of the Defiance. The ship drifted through space with almost no power, a tiny metal speck in the endless void. Inside, The crew huddled together for warmth. The heating systems had been shut down to reduce their heat signature. The lights were off. Even the air recyclers ran at minimum power, making every breath feel thin and stale. Commander Vasquez moved through the dark corridors, checking on her crew. They had been running silent for 5 days now, and the strain was beginning to show. People slept in shifts, sharing blankets and body heat. Food was rationed to small portions. Water was recycled so many times it tasted like metal. But no one complained. They all knew why they were suffering. "Commander," Lieutenant Chen whispered as she entered the small room that served as their tactical center. "I have been tracking Haramine patrol patterns. There is a gap in their coverage coming up in 6 hours. Vasquez looked at the dim display showing enemy positions. The swarm spread across space like a disease. Millions of biomechanical drones moving in complex formations. Finding a path through them was like threading a needle while blindfolded. "Are you sure about this gap?" she asked. "As sure as I can be," Chang replied. "Their movements follow patterns, but the patterns shift every few days. I have been learning how they think. It is strange, Commander. The Haramine is intelligent, but it is not creative. It repeats what works until something forces it to change. That is our advantage," Vasquez said. "They expect enemies to attack in formations, to use tactics they can analyze. They do not expect a single ship trying to sneak past them." Down in engineering, Ensign Okonkwo was performing miracles. She had modified the engines to fire in tiny bursts, each one lasting less than a second. These micro burns were invisible against the background radiation of space. She had also covered the hull with material salvaged from destroyed Haramine drones, making the Defiance smell like the enemy to their sensors. "How is she holding together?" Vasquez asked when she visited. Okonkwo grinned in the darkness. "She is angry, Commander. The ship does not like being treated this way, but she will hold. I have told her we need her for just a little longer." "You talked to the ship?" "Of course. Every good engineer talks to their ship. And the Defiance has been listening." Dr. Yusuf worked in what had been the medical bay, now converted into a laboratory. The virus was complete, stored in a special container that would survive the impact with the Nexus. But she kept checking it, adjusting it, making sure it was perfect. "Will it work?" Vasquez asked her. "It should," the doctor replied. "The Haramine neural network is incredibly complex, but it has one weakness. It shares everything. Pain, information, commands, all flow through the same channels. Once the virus enters, it will spread like fire through dry grass. How long until the swarm falls apart? Hard to say. Hours, maybe days. But the chaos will start immediately. The drones will lose coordination. They will start attacking each other or just drift aimlessly. The Nexus is the mind, and we are going to give that mind a very bad headache." On day 10, they entered the outer edge of the swarm. The crew barely breathed as enemy drones passed within kilometers of their position. Through the small viewports, they could see the Haramine ships, twisted combinations of metal and organic tissue. They moved without sound, without lights, like ghosts made of nightmares. "Contact bearing 72 Mark 5, whispered the sensor operator. "Range 2,000 meters and closing." Vasquez gripped her chair. "All stop. Everyone freeze." The Defiance hung motionless in space. The drone passed by, so close they could see the pulsing veins on its hull. For a terrible moment, it seemed to slow, as if sensing something wrong. Then it continued on its patrol, disappearing into the darkness. "That was too close," Chan muttered. "There will be more," Vasquez replied. "We are in their territory now." 3 times during the next 2 days, they were nearly discovered. Each time, human quick thinking saved them. Once, Okonkwo had to shut down the life support entirely for 20 minutes to avoid detection. The crew sat in the dark, slowly suffocating, waiting for the enemy to pass. Another time, a drone actually touched the hull of the Defiance with one of its sensor tendrils. Everyone on the bridge held their breath as the alien limb probed the disguised surface. Finally, they pulled away, apparently satisfied that this was just debris. On day 15, they saw it. The Harrowmind Nexus hung in space like a moon made of nightmares. It was enormous, built from thousands of fused ships and countless tons of stolen technology. Dark energy pulsed through its structure like blood through veins. Strange lights flickered across its surface, each one representing millions of calculations, millions of commands being sent to the swarm. This was the brain of the beast, the center of the enemy, the target they had come so far to destroy. And between them and their goal floated 80,000 drones. "Wow," Vasquez said quietly. "We knew it would not be easy." "Commander, those drones are packed tighter than anything we have seen," Chun reported. "There is no way to sneak through them. They will detect us the moment we get close. Then we do not sneak." Vasquez decided. "We run. Full power, maximum speed, straight at the Nexus." "That is insane," Chun said. "Yes," Vasquez agreed. "That is the point. They will not expect insanity. They will not know how to respond to something so irrational." She opened a channel to the entire ship. "All hands, this is the commander. We have reached the final stage of our mission. In a few minutes, we will make our run at the Nexus. I want full power to engines and weapons. Everything the ship has." She paused, feeling the weight of what she was about to say. "Most of us will not survive the next hour, but our sacrifice will save billions of lives. Our names will be remembered for as long as there are stars in the sky. So let us show the Harrowmind what happens when you threaten humanity." The crew responded with a cheer that echoed through every corridor of the ship. "Engine power coming online," Okonkwo reported from engineering. "The Defiance is ready to fly, Commander. Weapons charged and ready," the tactical officer announced. Vasquez looked at the Nexus on her view screen. 80,000 drones stood between her and victory. The odds were impossible, but humans had never let impossible stop them before. "All ahead full," she commanded. "Let us end this." The Defiance screamed forward like a bullet fired from the gun of a dying galaxy. Engines burning at maximum power, the ship accelerated toward the Nexus at speeds that should have torn it apart. The inertial dampeners, pushed far beyond their design limits, groaned and sparked. Crew members were pressed into their seats by the force, but they held on. 80,000 drones turning to intercept. Lieutenant Chun shouted over the roar of the engines. "Good," Commander Vasquez replied. "Let them come." The swarm reacted to this sudden threat with mechanical precision. Thousands of drones broke from their patrol patterns and surged toward the tiny human ship. Their weapons charged, their targeting systems locked on. Their collective mind calculated 1,000 ways to destroy this insignificant pest. But the Defiance was not fighting like any enemy the Harrowmind had faced before. "Evasive maneuvers," Vasquez ordered. "Pattern human, Mr. Chun." "What pattern is that?" the lieutenant asked. "Whatever you feel like. Make it up. Be unpredictable." Chun understood immediately. His hands flew across the controls, sending the ship into a wild series of turns and spins that followed no logic. No formation, no tactical doctrine. The Defiance danced through space like a leaf in a hurricane, moving in ways that made no military sense. And that was exactly the point. The Harrowmind's targeting systems tried to predict where the ship would be. They analyzed the movement patterns, looking for the mathematical formulas that governed all civilized warfare. But there were no formulas. There was only human chaos, human creativity, human refusal to do what was expected. Drones fired at where the Defiance should have been, but the ship was never there. Energy beams cut through empty space. Missiles exploded harmlessly behind them. "They cannot hit us." Chun laughed with wild excitement. "They keep guessing wrong. Do not get confident." Vasquez warned. "They will adapt. They always adapt. We just need to reach the Nexus before they figure us out." Okonkwo's voice crackled from engineering. "Commander, I am pushing the engines beyond anything they were designed for. The temperature is climbing fast. How long can you hold?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. After that, we melt. Then, we finish this in 10 minutes. The swarm was learning. Slowly, the drones began to adjust their tactics. They stopped trying to predict and started simply filling space with weapons fire. It was inefficient, but effective. No matter how wildly the Defiance moved, eventually something would hit them. Hull breach on Deck 7. A damage control officer reported. Emergency force fields holding. Weapons battery 3 is offline. Added the tactical officer. Keep firing. Vasquez commanded. Every drone we destroy is one less between us and the target. The Defiance was not a warship. It was an old patrol cruiser with modest weapons and light armor. But its crew fought with the fury of people who had nothing left to lose. Plasma cannons blazed. Missiles launched. Point defense systems shot down incoming fire with desperate precision. A drone slammed into the ship's port side, tearing a massive hole in the hull. Atmosphere rushed out into space. 3 crew members were pulled into the void before emergency bulkheads sealed the breach. "We lost Section 12. The damage officer cried. "Keep going," Vasquez ordered, her heart breaking for the crew members they had just lost. We stopped for nothing. In engineering, Ensign Okonkwo worked surrounded by fire and sparking consoles. The engines were overheating, pushed far beyond their limits. Warning alarms screamed. Coolant leaked from ruptured pipes. One of the primary conduits exploded, spraying superheated plasma across the room. Okonkwo threw herself in front of 2 junior engineers, taking the blast on her arms and back. Her skin burned, but she ignored the pain. "Get that conduit sealed," she shouted. "I did not come this far to let this ship die now." With burned hands and gritted teeth, she kept the engines running. She had promised the commander 10 minutes. She would deliver. On the bridge, the Nexus grew larger in the view screen. They were close now, so close. But the swarm was closing in, thousands of drones forming a wall of death between them and their target. "We will never get through," Chun said, his voice cracking. Vasquez studied the tactical display. He was right. The wall of drones was too thick, too concentrated. Even human unpredictability could not find a path through that kind of density, unless they made their own path. "All weapons, target that wall," she ordered. "Fire everything. Every missile, every torpedo, every shot we have left." "But Commander, if we use everything now, we will have nothing left for the final run." "We do not need weapons for the final run," Vasquez said grimly. "We have the ship." The crew understood. This had always been a one-way mission. The Defiance itself was the final weapon. Every weapon on the ship fired at once. A storm of destruction blazed toward the drone wall. For a few precious seconds, a gap appeared, a hole in the enemy formation just large enough for one ship to pass through. "Now," Vasquez screamed. "All power to engines." Ram speed. The Defiance shot through the gap. Drones clawed at them as they passed. The hull tore open in a dozen places. Fires burned throughout the ship. Crew members died at their posts, but their hands never left the controls. The Nexus filled the view screen, massive and terrible. They could see the pulsing energy networks that connected it to the swarm, the neural pathways that made it the brain of the enemy. "Dr. Yusuf," Vasquez called. "Is the virus ready?" "Ready to deploy on impact," the doctor replied from her laboratory. "Just get us there. Impact in 30 seconds. Chun counted down. The Haramine finally understood what was happening. For the first time in 3 centuries, the ancient intelligence felt something like fear. This tiny ship, this insignificant speck, was about to do something no enemy had ever done. It was about to win. 20 seconds. More drones converged, desperate to stop them. But it was too late. The Defiance was too close, moving too fast. 10 seconds. Commander Vasquez stood from her chair and faced her crew. These brave men and women who had followed her into certain death, who had given everything for a chance to save their galaxy. "Thank you," she said simply. "It has been an honor." "The honor was ours, Commander," Chen replied, tears streaming down his face. 5 seconds. Vasquez looked at the Nexus, now filling every screen. She thought of Earth, of blue oceans and green forests, of children laughing and families gathering. All of it would survive because of what they did today. Contact. The Defiance struck the Haramine Nexus at full speed. The ship shattered on impact, driving deep into the alien structure. The virus container broke open, releasing billions of engineered pathogens into the neural network. For one terrible moment, there was silence. Then the Nexus screamed. Across the galaxy, drones suddenly stopped. Their connection to the central mind dissolved into chaos. The virus spread through every neural pathway, corrupting commands, creating confusion, turning the collective intelligence against itself. Drones began attacking each other. Formations collapsed. The great swarm that had terrorized civilization for 3 centuries tore itself apart in confused agony. On Sanctuary Station, Admiral Javrin watched his sensors with disbelief. The Haramine was dying. Whatever the humans had done, it was working. "They did it," he whispered. "By all the stars, they actually did it." It took months for the swarm to fully collapse. Without the Nexus to guide them, the drones either destroyed each other or simply drifted into space, mindless and harmless. The threat that had seemed unstoppable was finally ended. 3 years later, a salvage team found the wreckage of the Defiance, embedded in the dead remains of the Nexus. There were no survivors. But among the debris, they found the ship's log, containing Commander Vasquez's final message. "If anyone finds this, know that we did not fail. 847 humans gave their lives so that trillions could live. Remember us not with sadness, but with pride. This is what humanity does. When the galaxy says something is impossible, we find a way." Admiral Javram personally oversaw the construction of the memorial. It stood on Earth, in a garden overlooking the ocean, with the names of every crew member carved in stone. The inscription reads simply, "They asked for a fleet. We gave them something better. We gave them us." And across the galaxy, species who had once ignored humanity now spoke their name with respect. The humans had proven something that day. They had shown that courage matters more than numbers, that will can overcome impossible odds, that sometimes one ship is enough. The stars were safe because 847 humans refused to give up. Their sacrifice would never be forgotten.